everyone, it is Shana Thornton with Let's Talk America Radio, and I trust you are having one amazing Thursday. It's April 30th. It's the last day of the month, and we are kicking off May extremely soon. And did you know that May is Mental Health Awareness Month? Now, that's exactly why we're on Real Talk right now, because we are going to bring in some thing or two about mental and emotional health. And I'm so excited to bring this exclusive guest on with us tonight. Just a friendly reminder that on Real Talk, we cover those topics and issues that you want to know more about with the intriguing people. They're experts. They are advocates in their field. And there she is. There's a beautiful face of the one and only Miss Sherlonda Adkins. She is a physician assistant who is dedicated to changing the stigma of mental and emotional health. How are you tonight?
Hey, Shana, I'm doing good. First of all, can you hear me okay? If not, I'll put my headphones in.
You sound great to me. And
Okay,
those that are
perfect.
watching us live, if you're having any technical issues with sound, do let us know. We'll try to address it. But Yolanda, welcome. I hope you and your family are doing well.
Yeah, we're doing good. It's starting to kind of feel normal now,
Okay.
if that makes sense.
Okay,
Yeah.
we've been dealing with a lot, and we want to dive right into it. I did open up by saying, of course, this is the last day of April. May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I think
hmm
for me and this platform, it's more than just saying, oh, it's just a name that they throw on a month. We know mental health is so important. And Shalonda, I can't help but think now that we're dealing with COVID-19, there are
hmm
issues that have to be addressed. But first, before we kick off this exclusive, intriguing conversation with the right guest, I want you to introduce yourself to our live viewers.
All right. Well, again, my name is Sherlonda Adkins. I'm a native of South Carolina. Have always lived here, lived in the upstate of South Carolina, then moved to the Low Country to attend the College of Charleston. And from there, did a variety of things, but finally found my passion in life and ended up going back to school to become a physician assistant. And even with going back to school, I knew I wanted to do something a little non-traditional in terms of helping people. And so I was able to create a job for myself in psychiatry. I initially thought I'd work in primary
Okay.
care, which, as you know, primary care, you do see a lot of mental
Absolutely.
health. And I also loved women's health, which is also where you see a lot of mental health.
Yeah.
And so when I did my mental health rotation, absolutely loved it. It felt very natural to me. And so I went to my preceptor and just asked him, I said, hey, have you ever thought about having a PA join your team? Because he was a very busy provider.
Okay.
And he said, well, never thought about it, but if you'd like to, I'd love to have you. So I did that for 6 years, working in outpatient psych, and then just kind of listening to my patients and seeing some of their frustrations with, traffic and not being able to, get time from work or, not having babysitters. I had some patients who have difficulty ambulating and couldn't really get into the office. And so I started thinking like, what about this telemedicine thing? And this is way before
Okay.
COVID-19. And started doing a lot of research. No one had done it in our state. There were no completely telepsych practices,
Okay.
not from psychiatrists, not from PAs, not from nurse practitioners. So had to do a lot of research. Took me months talking to a lot of different people at the board, attorneys, and finally got it up and running, and just in time for
I know.
COVID-19. So I'm very excited about it. It's been such a blessing. I've been able to help a lot of people, from the convenient spot of their own home, or sometimes even they're sitting in the car on their lunch break. And so it's been great.
I love that. I mean, I love that it's innovation meeting a need. And that's exactly what we want to focus on tonight. Shalonda, so many people are saying there's so much news coming at them, the data. And I don't need to tell you, a medical provider, it can be concerning. Right now in the United States, it is documented that over 1 million people are suffering with COVID-19. Of that, there is an economic impact where now over 30 million people in America have filed for unemployment. That's a lot on top of a lot on top of a lot. And many people are sheltered in place for good reasons. As a medical provider, you know that. It's not just because it's to help cut down on the spread of this very serious virus. But when you talk about mental and emotional health, you notice what I listed was not included there. How does that impact our psyche? How does it impact how we feel about ourselves and the world around us?
So the biggest impact is just, for a lot of people, our foundation has kind of been taken from under us. Living in Charleston in the Low Country lately, every year we've had to deal with hurricanes coming. And so it's like a big frenzy of going to the store, getting water, making sure you have things in place. But the difference is the rest of the world is still normal. So we could leave, we could evacuate, and then go to a place where we could resume that normalcy until we get home.
Yes.
This was completely different. There was no place you could escape to. There was no, let me fly out of the United States and go to Canada. Guess what? They're dealing with the same thing. So for a lot of people, what you're asking about the emotional, how it affects
Yes.
us, like this is something that we have no answer for. It's never happened before. So there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of, anxiety of how long will this happen? How will my family be affected?
Yes.
So I think on an overall scale, we all sort of had those same concerns, healthcare, education system, the economic impact, will I continue to have my job? How will I pay my bills? But then on a personal level, we all have our own individual struggles. Like for me, I was one of the ones who kind of felt trapped because I like to go. I like to go different places. And, it hit me like, there's nowhere for you to go. Like you are going to be stuck right here. And that may sound very trivial. And I always tell people never discount your feelings because like I said, we all had the big things we had to be concerned about, but then it trickles down to individually how this affects you. So a lot of people that I've talked to have struggled with the lack of structure. So as you mentioned, with the high unemployment rates, a lot of people are home. And believe it or not, I think that when we were in kindergarten and they used to tell us this is nap time, go lay on your mat, and this is center time, let's go to this center. I think deep down inside as adults, we still like that structure to have people to say, like, this is what you need to do. So it's 6:30, it's time to get up and go to work. Well, what happens when you no longer have that structure to your day?
Valid.
Right? The days kind of seem to just all blend together. Boundaries sort of start to become blended. There are a lot of parents now who are forced to become teachers or facilitators in their children's education that they've never had to do before, right? And that has caused a lot of extra stress and anxiety for a lot of people. People sometimes will use that drive to work or that drive from work as their me time to kind of decompress and just ride in silence, or maybe even to catch up with other people. But now if you're working from home and then the kids are right outside the door, it all gets blended. And believe it or not, we all need like time to reflect and just have quiet personal time. But if you're doing everything in the house with a lot of people in the house, it can be hard to even get that me time. So just the little things like that, those little changes play a big factor in someone's emotional health.
You're so right. And you said something I want to harp on. You said that you should never discount your feelings. And I think that's so important because we know obviously these things are happening for a reason in terms of we're sheltered in place to help us. But that doesn't mean that we can't feel angry about it, that we can't seem frustrated, or some people are lonely. Even if you're in a house with 5 people or you're by yourself, right? We know loneliness is not necessarily you're in a room with everybody, so you're not going to be lonely. It's different from that. So discounting your feelings is something you shouldn't do. But I think, Sherlonda, and I want to do real talk right now. There are millions of Americans that come from households where maybe when you were a child and you said, well, that hurts. Well, be a big girl, be a big boy. You don't cry. Big kids don't cry. And stop complaining. You just kind of suck it up and you keep moving. They've carried that into adulthood. And now that has built, and now COVID-19 has come in. And I would imagine there's some sort of emotional disruption that could be happening from that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because notice some of the emotions that you listed, you said anger, frustration, loneliness. What else does that sound like? That also sounds like grief, right? So typically when you think about grief, you're thinking about grieving the loss of a person or relationship. And so you go through the denial phase. So how many of us, when we first started hearing this, was like, oh, that's happening over in China. Well, that's over there. It's not here. This is America, right? So the whole denial phase. And then when we started getting the warnings about, we better take this serious. There was still a group of people who were still like, I don't know, I'm still going to go out with my friends and I'm still going to go do this, until we actually had to have regulations and, stipulations put on us to protect us to say, no, you cannot. Yeah. So there's a denial phase. Then there's the whole, confusion, well, how are we going to deal with this? So then you get mad, you're angry, you're listening to the news and trying to figure out like what to believe. So this can really be correlated to like grief, like going through grief, because some of us have experienced a loss, like a loss of, some of the bigger things you can think about, loss of identity. If you are a person whose identity is often in your career or your job, and now you're no longer working, right? So it's very similar to grief. So these feelings that people are feeling, like I've talked to many patients. So I've been super busy. So in addition to seeing patients in my practice that is growing throughout the state, I am also covering for one of my best friends who's a nurse practitioner in psychiatry. She just had a baby. She had 2 babies. She had twins. Oh. And so I'm also covering to see her patients as well. So the week before last, I think I saw maybe almost 100 patients. That's a lot. Just in case, just to put it in perspective, to see 100 psychiatric patients, that's a lot, right? And that's just a small segment of, people that need to be seen. But some of the common themes that I'm seeing, there are a lot of people who are struggling. Is this transcends race, gender, ethnicity. Doesn't matter what your career. You could be the attorney or the doctor, or you could be, someone who, works as a janitor. It doesn't matter. Like, generally as human beings, this fear and these feelings of loss and uncertainty are really taking a toll on people. And I think we haven't even seen the worst of it.
Wow.
To be honest, I don't think we really have. And something else you said about being younger and being told to suppress your feelings. I see it more in males because of the way that our society is. When you're even a little boy, if a little boy starts to cry, he's told, you don't cry, boys don't cry. And then these boys grow up to become men, and then they're trying to figure out how to process their emotions and how to process their feelings. And so a lot of men are struggling right now. Imagine growing up saying that, being told that you're the man, you're supposed to provide for your family, and then this pandemic happens and now you're out of work. A lot of men are even, having problems with that too. And marriages. So this could be a blessing or a curse, this pandemic. I would say for a couple who maybe, their biggest issue was that they did not have a lot of time to spend together and, connect and, just continue to learn each other. And now this happens and they are stuck together and they're flourishing, they're blooming. Or you could have the couple who's like, you know what, I love you because I don't have to spend that much time with you. And now we're together all the time. And guess what? You get on my nerves.
And you bring up some very valid points. For those that are watching us, thank you so much. Welcome to Real Talk. We are having an exclusive conversation right now with a mental health provider. She's a medical provider. She's a physician assistant. She's out of Charleston, South Carolina. Sherlonda Adkins, just full transparency. I've known her many, many years. She knew me
yes, we go way back.
She knew me when I was many pounds lighter, Sherlonda. So I congratulate you on all of your success in your meaningful platform, because I think it's one that's needed. I want to talk about some hard data that disturbs me. I have seen that they are saying rates of depression are up and that suicide numbers are up. Do you know why?
Well, one of the reasons, so when you think about depression, a lot of times with depression, one of the symptoms of depression is isolation. Okay. And let me just kind of back up a minute and talk about depression for a second. A lot of people think about depression as being, you're in a dark room by yourself, crying, can't get out of bed, like a severe form of depression. But there are a lot of people who are walking around functioning, undiagnosed, depressed. Okay. I learned when I first started practicing, because I also practice in internal medicine concurrently with psychiatry, because I wanted to have a holistic approach, because sometimes when people are dealing with depression or anxiety, it's not primary depression or anxiety. It could be secondary to hypo or hyperthyroidism, or maybe they change medications or something of that nature. So anyway, working in a primary care setting, I learned early on that I can't just say, well, tell me, how have you been? Are you depressed? Because guess what? People are going to say, no, I'm not depressed. But I learned to start asking questions like, have you felt a lack of motivation lately? Like, name some of the things you normally like to do. And they're like, well, I like to go fishing, or I like to cook, but I'm having a hard time. It's a struggle. I haven't taken my boat out in a while to go fishing. So those are some of the things you start to realize, with depression is, lack of interest, loss of motivation, isolation. So not answering the phone when you see people call because you know they're going to want to talk or invite you to go out and you really don't want to. So those are some of the other symptoms that people tend to not think about. Most people think of depression that, like I said, you're crying, and you're just really sad in a dark room. So with depression and isolation, if we're now in a time where we're having to social distance, right, and you're already wanting to be alone, what do you think? That's going to compound that, right? Yeah. So social distancing is not the same as social isolation. That's why I've really been encouraging my patients, stay connected with your friends, stay connected with your family members, whether it's through a video or whether it's through a phone call or even drive-by. We started doing drive-bys last weekend, and that was quite fun, where we call people, come outside, because we want to say, hey, get that human element back. But if you're doing social isolation, that's being completely by yourself. And if you're depressed, there's nobody there to check on you. There's no support system to come in and make sure that you're doing okay. It's easy to really withdraw. So that's one of the reasons. Another reason, like we talked about before, for a lot of people, this is like a grief period. Sometimes, when people who've never dealt with depression before and they experience a loss for the first time, they may be dealing with depression. For the first time, they may have thoughts about, well, what's the point of me being here? And it starts with a thought like that, and then it progresses. So for people who've experienced a loss, whether, with their health, or even if they have lost family members as a result of COVID-19, the loss of finances, it's easy when you think about finances, it's easy to think about it like wherever, your financial situation is, and you say, well, okay, I looked at my portfolio and I've lost, a few $1,000s, no big deal. But, what about the people that have billions of dollars and they're looking at it now, looking at how much money they've lost. So for someone who has, again, their identity or their worth wrapped up in their financial status or their career, this could seem like a huge loss. And one thing that people can't take for granted is how other people feel. People are just built differently. It's just like muscles. Some people are built with nice muscle tone. Some have to work really hard at it. Some people are built to endure stress better than others. So whereas you may say, okay, I lost my job, no big deal, I find another. Someone else, they lose their job, that could be the end of the world for them.
So it varies from person to person. It's such a great conversation. We're talking about your mental health, your emotional well-being during COVID-19, and also our featured guest tonight, the one and only mental health provider, Ms. Sherlonda Adkins. She's a physician assistant, is saying that these are things that you should really be addressing. And now that we're in shelter in place, majority of the United States continues to be, there are other ways to still address it. And here you are, you're talking about you can do telemedicine to really address those concerns. I want to bring up the S word. I want to bring up stigma, because it's in so many communities, so many groups that people will talk about the hypertension. They will talk about the type 2 diabetes, hypothyroidism. They'll talk about that. They'll talk about cancer that runs in the family. Sherlonda, you know what I know, but when people start talking about mental health, many people, educated people, well-intended people, good people back away. Right? Bring that up. That doesn't run in the family. You don't have postpartum depression. There's no such thing. And there are people that will even go about it and say, just pray about it, and that's going to work itself out. I would imagine as a medical provider, you have some other tips. And I know you are a woman of faith, you and your family, your husband is a pastor. But I want you right now to share with us how important it is for people to really seek the professional help they deserve.
I love the way you say it. They deserve it. That's right. They deserve it. Here's the thing. And I love this. I'm going to try not to get like on my soapbox and just say what I need to say. If somebody came to you and said, my heart's beating funny and I'm having shortness of breath, the first thing you would say is, you better go see a cardiologist. If somebody came to you and they said that, I'm dizzy and, I got this funny taste in my mouth, I'm using the bathroom all the time, you need to go to your doctor. So why is it that when someone says, I'm just not feeling right, I'm feeling off, that, like mentally, like something's wrong with me? Oh, nothing wrong with you. Why do we get that? What people who say that fail to realize is that the brain is an organ.
Yeah,
So just like the heart is an organ, your liver, your
that's right.
kidneys, your lungs, your brain is an organ. So being that I spend a lot of time in the faith-based community, and I've heard exactly what you said, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, you just need to pray about it. And that bothers me so much. For the person who says, oh, you just need to pray about it, and then if that person goes on to end their life, or, you know, even worse, go and commit a crime and end multiple lives at a time, but you told them just to go and pray about it instead of going to seek help. The Bible talks about renewing our mind,
Okay.
the way we think, our thoughts, our emotions.
Yes.
Yes, and I believe that, and I'm a witness to that, that God can help us to regulate those. But again, when it comes to the organ, like God designed our bodies, and he put providers, medical providers in place to be able to take care of these bodies. So when there's something going on with your brain, you need to go and get help. And I don't know where, you know, I don't know where the original stigma came from. I do see it more in the African American. I don't know if it's more because, you know, we're a proud people, you know, we went through a lot, you know, we overcame slavery, you know, we're strong, so we can handle anything. I don't know if it stems from that, but it really does make me sad. Sometimes when I do have African American patients, they don't have as much support in terms, sometimes I even have patients who say, no one knows that I'm even here. Like, you know, my family would not support me. They don't want me on any medications. And it's just really sad, because I also know that a lot of things carry from generation to generation. It's genetic. So when we look at our kids, you have two such handsome little boys, and you look at them, one looks like his daddy and one looks like you. So our kids, not only do they inherit our external features, but they also inherit our internal features, things that we can't see. They will display characteristics that we often have. So when I have a new patient and I'm asking questions and they're telling me about these symptoms that they're having, I'll often say, you know, who else in your family has similar symptoms, whether they were diagnosed or not, who else? And they can usually pinpoint, and a lot of times going back a couple of generations, where grandma was like that too. So these things do run in families, and why people don't want to get help for it, it's just so sad. But a funny thing, and I'll tell you this, I was talking to a psychiatrist, and he said, you know, you can go to a party and you'll see people there, and if they see their cardiologist, they'll be like, oh, you know, there's Jane, she's my cardiologist, or there's Phil over there, he's my pulmonologist, but they'll never say, hey, look at Sherlonda, she's the person I see. Well, I just know her. They'll never want to tell anybody how they know you. But I try to make my patients very comfortable. Like when I first graduated, I was so proud of my white coat. I earned that white coat, and I wanted to wear that white coat. But what I found is, wearing that white coat, people would automatically come into my office and, you know, already feel kind of scared. First of all, a lot of people have anxiety about even, you know, going to that type of appointment because of what they've seen on TV, which may not be accurately portrayed. Again, they may be doing it on their own with no support, and then they come in and they see me in this white coat, you know, looking stuffy. So I try to like not do any of that. I don't wear a white coat. And, you know, I ask people about their kids. I want to know about their lives. My patients have told me a lot of things. Like I've gone to different restaurants and tried a lot of different things based on the recommendations of my patients. They're regular people, and I try to be the same for them as well.
You do an awesome job. Is the sound quality good? Can you still hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
You gave it great. Awesome.
I can hear you.
Great. I want to bring up parenting for a second, because when you talked about kids, I think that's key. There may be someone listening to us right now. Maybe there is a dad who loves his children, and maybe he's having what sounds like anxiety. And he knows that because it's not properly being addressed by seeing a medical provider like you, that maybe that it's interrupting relationships in his life. And I want you to talk about that. But also, when they're a parent, I will hear people that I've interviewed who have great testimonies, and they'll talk about some of the mental issues their parents have had, and how when it was not addressed, when it was not treated, how that rolled on them in terms, sometimes, not all the time, but when it's not addressed, it was traumatic for these children. And they go on in life and they're telling others and power and a testimony and sharing your journey. But Sherlonda, talk right now how critical it is for parents to recognize that when they don't seek the help they need and they deserve, how that impacts others in their lives, but especially those vulnerable children.
Yeah, well, first of all, to kind of go back to, a parent and, getting help. Sometimes it takes the outside eyes. So the people who are closest to you, tend to see things that you don't. And I will often tell my patients that if I'm starting them on a new medication, and I'll tell them, ask your spouse, or ask your mom, or ask your child, because they're probably going to see the changes before you even notice them yourself. So patients who have people who are going to kind of push them and kind of urge them and say, you know what, this thing that you have going on, this is not going to work.
Okay.
If you have somebody like that in your life, those people tend to get help a lot faster.
Okay.
I've also had patients until it affects them at work, they may not come in. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, when do you seek help? Mm-hmm. The answer to that is when it starts to become a problem. Now, all of us have fluctuations in our emotion. Mm-hmm. God created us to have emotions that fluctuate, meaning that if your puppy gets hit by a car, like, you should cry, like you should be sad.
That's right.
If you're at a basketball game and your favorite team is about to win, or it's in overtime or something like that, and they win, you want to be elated and happy. The problem is when fluctuations in your mood, and those fluctuations are either too high. Oh, okay. The fluctuations are either too high or too low, and they're lasting for an extended period of time to where it's starting to affect you in your relationships at work or at home. Wow. And so, and if it doesn't, you could have somebody who lives by themselves and they could be like the grumpiest, meanest bipolar person. But if they're living by themselves and they're not working, they're not bothering anybody, and it doesn't bother them, then guess what? It's fine. But for the people who are trying to function, so if you're a parent and you have children who are depending on you to have a stable mood, then yeah, you need help. You need a stable mood. And again, I cannot stress the importance of having a support network. And it doesn't even have to be a lot of people, because with things like this, I mean, you don't really need a lot of people in your business, because people will try to be helpful, but sometimes they're not. I have seen the most helpful people give the worst medical advice, and I just sit and just kind of shake my head. Go to the professional. But the people who have the biggest support systems are the ones who tend to do the best, because it's a journey. There's no such thing as taking a pill and then you're fixed. Medication does what it's supposed to do. In fact, I have this little thing, and I'm gonna put it up on the screen because I share this with my patients all the time. But medications they do what they're supposed to do. We have three main neurotransmitters that affect our mood and anxiety levels. It's norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin, right? And sometimes those levels are off. So medication helps with that, but medication does not help you in terms of changing your perspective, putting the mechanisms and tactics in place for when you know that there's a trigger that something that usually triggers your anxiety, okay, or if you're dealing with depression and you're trying to create a new mindset. Medicine does not do that for you, and that's where a good counselor comes in. People are often confused about the difference between psychology or psychologist and then psychiatry. So psychiatry is more on the medical side. It's the study of the brain and behavioral medicine, and then using a combination of treatment methods, primarily medication management, and then we have the counselors or therapists who come in and then also work with the patients to try to help with the other lifestyle things. It's sort of like I can equate it to someone who has high blood pressure. So psychiatry would be like the high blood pressure medications, and then the psychologist would be like the lifestyle modifications, like decreased sodium in your diet, walking, losing weight, that sort of thing.
I see. I mean, and so it's always best for someone to seek medical help and for to really figure out which one would work best for them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. And, because I'll get that question all the time, do I need to see a psychologist or a psychiatrist? And it just depends. I mean, if it depends on the situation. If it's someone who, like, this is a new onset of feeling depressed, and you might have an idea of why you're feeling depressed, then you probably want to start with a counselor first and kind of talk it out. People say, I just want to talk to someone, so it probably would be best to start with a counselor, and then a good counselor can then recognize if there's something more going on to where you need to kind of have a two-pronged approach with the counseling and then also getting some medications on board.
Everyone, you are watching and listening to Real Talk presented by Let's Talk America Radio. I'm Shana. My exclusive guest tonight is the one and only mental health provider, Sherlonda Adkins, out of the low country of Charleston, South Carolina, one of my favorite cities. Beautiful, beautiful city. Sherlonda, as we begin to wrap up this conversation, and we thank everyone that's making comments. If you've got any questions, let us know. Jennifer said good stuff. Also, Jennifer pointed out when you were speaking about grief earlier, she said she had a moment of grieving when she was separated from her church physically due to the shelter in place. And Sherlonda, I think you're saying we need to certainly acknowledge that, and that would be a difference for a lot of churchgoers and people of faith.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I do want to bring up something that's real when we talk about people, and you said the impact of mental health and emotional health on those relationships. Say there is a spouse listening right now, right? And they're like, well, what's she named about depression or anxiety, or if you even talk about schizophrenia or manic depression, sounds like the person that maybe I'm living with. It sounds like some qualities my daughter may have. Though, approaching someone about this is so complicated. I mean, we know this from just trying to offer anything for anyone. People can often be defensive. Sometimes justifiably, sometimes not. They'll blow it out of proportion. Why did you say that when they could have simply been saying something they noticed, and they're saying it out of love and concern. Sherlonda, help that wife, help that girlfriend right now, help that father that may see some signs that are troubling to them, and they want to help as much as possible, but maybe they're afraid that person's not ready to accept that help or that advice, or saying, go see someone like a Sherlonda or someone else.
Yeah, that's a tough one, because that's going to really depend on, that relationship, right? Okay. So if it's somebody that you really trust, then you're going to trust that when they're telling you that, they're telling you not to try to hurt you, but they're telling you because they genuinely are concerned. And you're right, it's all about the approach and the delivery, because if it's someone who's, just reacting to something that you just did, and maybe they're a little upset about it, and say, well, you're off and you just need to go get help. Well, they're probably not going to receive that. But, like generally speaking, maybe even if you don't feel like you're able to talk to the person, maybe even sending an article, Googling the symptoms and, something just to open up the dialogue and just try to keep it as, safe and non-threatening as possible. But that is a tough one. If someone gets really angry after someone has approached them in love, they could be getting angry because they partly believe what's being told to them, and perhaps it's not the first time they've heard that, but maybe they're just trying to deny it, but then they're hearing it again. Because for the most part, like I say this with bipolar, if I have a patient that I'm seeing for the first time and we're, having an evaluation and trying to figure out what's going on, and there's, different moods, and say this person is like our age and, our early 40s, I'll say to them, you're probably not bipolar type 1, because you would not have made it this far in life without no one catching that, because of the symptoms and the behavioral patterns that would present. So, to answer your question, it's really going to depend on the relationship, but the biggest key is trying to do it in love and not to put someone down or to make them feel shamed, because, most people who are dealing with mental illness, they are not proud of it. They're not proud of it. It's not even anything that they asked for. Like I said before, a lot of this is genetic. A lot of it is.
That's right.
And so to then make someone feel even worse, that's not going to help. In fact, it could kind of push them further away.
When you brought up they didn't ask for it, that's so true. No more than someone asking for hypertension, heart failure, or cancer. Before you leave us, I want to talk about the future, and I want to talk about children, if you will. And I'm not sure if you do see pediatrics or children with concerns, but for that mother or grandmother who loves and dotes on her grandbabies, and maybe she's seeing some things early in that's saying, well, that's not quite how I've raised 8 kids. That doesn't seem to be a normal developmental behavior or mental reaction with things. Children, you know this, Yolanda, you're a mother, a proud mother to the 3 amazing kids. Children are as different as they are with anything in life on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
But are there some signs? Are there some common tips that we should be aware of if we're like, that's probably not the reaction I thought? And I do want to preference this. I'm not talking about a toddler, and I do want to say that as a mother, because I'm like a 2 or 3-year-old who you take away their ice cream cone because it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they have a meltdown. But I'm talking when the age where some emotion should probably be a little more stable now. Help us out.
Yeah, and then you also want to look at that in different settings too. So is that child only misbehaving with one particular parent, or are we also hearing this from the teachers? Are we also hearing this from the parents of the other little kids that they play with? Because sometimes, and you know this, kids can behave and perform a certain way with one parent and be completely different with the other. So the key would be to look at the different settings and see if this is consistent behavior or consistent reactions that we're seeing across the board. And then that would be more indicative of a problem. So the first step I would say is to go to the pediatrician.
Okay.
You know, most children have their regular well-checked visits. And so to bring it up with the pediatrician to find out if this is indeed something that's normal or abnormal. And then at that point, would they need a referral? For children, I always like for them to have, you know, pediatric evaluations with specific, like specialists, pediatric psychologists, because kids are so, you know, they're very fragile, first of all. And secondly, there's so many different things that could be going on, you know, from their growth and development. So it's,
Correct.
you know,
Good point.
I try to stay away from labeling kids, but then you also have to look at mom and dad as well. Sometimes for parents, and I've seen this before with my patients, they'll come in kind of concerned, you know, saying, I'm starting to see some of the symptoms in my son that I'm dealing with, or I'm starting to see some of the symptoms, you know, in my daughter that, you know, I also saw in, you know, my mom, that type of thing. And so again, that can be a key that there may be something that's going on, but it's always better to ask, you know. Early intervention is best, because if there is a problem and things go unchecked, then of course we're thinking in all settings, we're thinking about academically, right. You know, children struggling, if they're not well, if they're disruptive in class, and guess what, they're not learning. And so then that, you know, that creates a whole another issue there. And then most people have more than one child. So if you have one child that seems to be struggling, then there's going to be tension and conflict between the siblings. And then that parent is probably going to always be stressed because, you know, always having to put out fires. Yeah. So it's just a domino effect.
So definitely you want to get it addressed. Sherlonda, you're amazing. There's someone on by the name of Melissa who said you're amazing. So she agrees.
Oh, thank you. It's so sweet.
You are amazing. As we close out, I want to circle back to COVID-19. And again, you rehashed it, everything that people are dealing with. Do you have any closing comments for someone watching us right now that they have a personality where the uncertain scares them, which would be a lot of us, and they're thinking, where's my next paycheck going to come from? Maybe the stimulus check has already been spent on paying rent. The thinking of, do I feel safe to send my kids back to school whenever they do end up going back? There's so many ifs with this. You know this as a medical provider. There are strong predictions. This is the first wave, and we're not out of the first wave yet, but there's a second wave coming in the latter part of the year. The good news, recently been, you know, they informed us that maybe there could be a vaccine as early as next year, the first quarter. But next year, first quarter, second wave, all that's building on American psyche. Sherlonda, any closing words to get us through this trying time that none of us have ever seen in the history of the United States that's a living right now?
Right. Absolutely. I do have some suggestions. Number one, limit the amount of information that you're taking in on a daily basis, because you can get one thought and then it's well, if this happens, then this will probably happen. And then you can just find yourself down a trail in a dark place. So limit the amount of information, get what you need to get, avoid social media. Well, I won't say avoid, because sometimes we do get information, but limit
Well, they can't
Right,
misinterpret.
right. But limit the amount of what you're reading and other people's negativity. That's important because it does play a lot mentally. The next one is making sure, like, stay active,
Okay.
even like 10 or 15 minutes a day, get that body up and going, get the heart rate going. That's super important. Decluttering your mind. So when you're having all of these thoughts, where do these thoughts go? Get them out, put them on paper. I even told someone before, take your phone and record yourself, like how you're feeling right now, play a recording, get it out. It's okay to feel that way, but you cannot keep these things inside or talk to someone else. And if possible, try to find an escape. A lot of people have started to, what they call, like, stir crazy, being in the walls of the house. Try to go somewhere. If you can get in your car and just drive,
Okay.
30 minutes, or even, recreate some space in your house. I've seen some pretty creative things where people have, taken closets and made them into little workspaces, rearranged furniture, making, gyms in the house since we can't go to the gym. So just creating a different environment, a candle, that appeals to your senses, music. So I would say the biggest thing is just really limiting the amount of information, because you can take this and just roll with it and get so scared.
Absolutely.
Look back at old pictures of happy times.
Yeah.
If you start to feel sad, pull out old pictures when you were with your family, look at those. Any little thing to keep you centered and grounded, do it.
Wow, I love that. Do what keeps you grounded. And if you think or if it's
Mhm.
been recommended to seek professional help, even now, if there's some concern that I don't really want to go into the doctor's office and perhaps, but telemedicine is an option now, which I think is an amazing thing. And not only when it comes to the mind, this, I mean, they're seeing them for physical ailments too. I guess that would be to a certain degree, but this is the time to really seek the help. And we can't say, well, it's not recommended that I go out, because we can still get help.
That's right. There's no excuse now. And that was, like I said, I started my practice before the pandemic was even a thought. And the whole idea behind it was, I want to help remove the barriers.
Yes.
I want to help, the people who are struggling because of the stigma. Because coming into a crowded waiting room, Charleston's not that big. I mean, sometimes we've had instances where patients knew each other. And for a lot of people, that's very uncomfortable. So you can be seen from the privacy of your own home. I see people as early as 7 in the morning and as late as 7:30 p.m. So it's very flexible. So, I'm making my stamp in this world
You are.
by telling people, look, I'm here to help. We'll make it as comfortable as possible. So yeah, telemedicine is going to be around for a long time. Unfortunately, this was a bad catalyst, but with everything, there's always a silver lining. And so I think for our healthcare system,
Yes.
this has been a huge plus, and have kind of forced people to, in a lot of providers, to get out of their comfort zone and have to be creative and do some new things. But overall, I think it's going to be one of the best things for our patients.
Yes, and Sherlonda, I think you bring up a good point again. We don't know what the future holds in terms of this illness going away, and unfortunately, possible other illnesses like this. So the convenience of your home, get it on the go. So many people say, I don't have time to see the doctor. I don't have time to go to the gym. I think we're seeing now with virtual capabilities, those excuses are being removed. You're such an amazing guest. I've learned from you. You've inspired and motivated all of us. Melissa saying great advice. I know Jennifer out of Atlanta gave thumbs up on all that you're giving us. Tell our live viewers where they can go to connect with you and learn more about your practice.
Yeah, absolutely. So my practice is Psych My Way. So it's www.psychmyway.com, and psych is spelled P-S-Y-C-H. And and I have information on my website about what we do, fees, all of that. And it's really easy. You just click a button that says book, and you pick the day and the time that you want to be seen, and that's as easy as it gets.
Easy as it goes, addressing issues.
Yeah, let's see. Can you see my business card?
On my side, not as much. The pixels are breaking out. Definitely come to our page on Instagram, and we're going to give you the connection to go to her if you are looking for the information. Dr. Richardson out of Atlanta said yes. We had a UGA student that said this was great information. Thank you for reaching so much information, Sherlonda. We wish you continued success on all that you're doing. Thanks for joining us on Real Talk.
Thank you for having me. You stay safe.
I will. I will. An amazing individual. An awesome, excellent advice. That guy's your husband that said that. And
That is my husband.
and someone
He
said,
might be a little bit biased.
but he's truthful. And someone said, get a V card so we can get the info. It's an electronic card. So I will share the information again. Thanks for watching, everyone. We're not done with Real Talk. Join us tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. We're going to be speaking with Carisha Moore. She's Executive Director and President of Usher's New Look. She's an award-winning educator. She's going to talk about the new face of education and what nonprofits like what she is running is doing to adjust to COVID-19. She's also going to talk about the indiscrepancies that go on in the education system. Are there ways to close that gap? It's going to be a great conversation with this award-winning educator. Join us tomorrow night. Stay with us on Instagram. Follow us on Facebook as well. For additional information, visit ltaradio.com. That's ltaradio.com. We're offering real talk for real people. That's you. Thanks, Yolanda. We love you. Great job.
Bye.
So you can see her website is right there.
Yeah, I messed it up. I'm going to send it again. I got too happy.
Nicole is saying great information.
All right. Bye.
Did that come through? I want to make sure people have
Yes, it's there.
her website, and that's www.psyche. And on my part, it doesn't have, is it .com?
Psychmyway.com.
Psychmyway.com. Great, because it did not come through yet on this end. So hopefully they can.
Oh, okay.
Again, join us on LTA Radio Instagram page, and I'm going to provide her handle so you can connect with her on Instagram and follow up this conversation. Stay safe, everyone. And someone said, keep up the great work. Jennifer out of Atlanta said that. There it is, psychmyway.com, okay? Let's make sure we take care of everything ourselves, spiritually, physically, and according to Sherlonda Adkins, it's critical also mentally and emotionally.
Amen.
Stay safe, everybody. We love you here, and let's talk America.
Bye.